Good evening. I'll call the meeting to order. We have forum tonight and regrets from Councillor Mancini. So I'll begin with the land acknowledgement. I acknowledge the Halifax Regional Municipality is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. The municipality acknowledges the peace and friendship treaties signed in this territory and recognizes that we are all treaty people. Approval of the minutes from January 24th. Moved by Councillor Clary, second by Councillor Mason. All in favor? Aye. Minutes are done. Approval of the additions and deletions. Ms. Clerk.
There are no additions or deletions from the clerk's office.
Anything from council? Seeing none, would someone like to move the order of business? Moved by Councillor Mason, second by Councillor Clary. All those in favor? Aye. Our order of business is approved. Business arising out of the minutes, we have none. Are there any conflicts of interest here tonight? Seeing none. Correspondence, Ms. Clerk.
No correspondence has been received by the clerk's office.
Thank you. Does anyone have any petitions tonight? None. We have no presentations. Public participation. So not on our variance hearing, but if anyone would like to address council on something else tonight, this would be your moment. Would anyone like to speak to us tonight? Would anyone like to speak to us tonight? Third and final call. All right. So we have no public participation tonight. Information items brought forward, there are none. We have no reports. We have no motions. Actually, where is variance, Ms. Clerk, on this annotated sheet? No, it was on the back side.
Oh.
I skipped ahead to the end of our meeting. We're missing the main event, so we'll just go to there now. 10.1, we'll circle back. Variance appeals. So we'll start tonight with case variance 2024-00642, appeal of variance refusal 3162 Ralston Avenue. And we'll start with our staff presentation from, is it Ronan Gray? Awesome. I'm glad it was a mutual error, Ms. Clerk. There
we go. Okay. Great. Hello. My name is Ronan Gray. I'm a Planner 1 with Development Services, and I'm here to provide the background on the variance appeal before you this evening. This is case VAR 2024-00642 pertaining to 3162 Ralston Avenue. The variance request was refused by the development officer, and that refuse has been appealed by the applicant. So the variance requested by the applicant was to reduce the minimum rear yard setback from 6 meters to 2.3 meters to accommodate an attached deck. For background, this property is zoned ER3, which is Established Residential 3 under the Regional Center Land Use Bylaw. The property features an existing single unit dwelling, and the applicant has applied to reconstruct an attached deck in the rear yard in a way which does not meet the requirements of the Land Use Bylaw. The property shown with a red border is the site in question, which is located on the northwest corner of Ralston Avenue and Pearson Drive. On the left here is an aerial view of the property, which features an existing attached deck, which the applicant intends to replace. And to the right, you will see a view of the attached deck in the rear yard as seen from Pearson Drive in the south. In this simplified site plan view, you can see the proposed attached deck with cross-hatching at a distance of 2.3 meters from the rear lot line. And this is a rear elevation of the proposed deck that was provided by the applicant at a height of 3 foot 3 inches or about 1 meter above grade. So the variance requested to accommodate the attached deck you just saw is simply a reduced rear yard setback from the standard 6 meters in the ER zones to 2.3 meters. So as a process that is governed by the Halifax Charter, a development officer may not grant approval of a variance where the variance violates the intent of the land use bylaw, the difficulty experienced is general to the properties in the area, or the difficulty experienced results from an intentional disregard for the requirements of the land use bylaw. So we'll take those one by one. The first test, whether the proposal violates the intent of the land use bylaw. So setbacks are intended to ensure that structures and uses maintain an adequate separation from adjacent structures, streets, and property lines. This is to ensure access, safety, privacy, and consistency of neighborhood character. The proposed 2.3 meter setback is less than half of the minimum requirement in the zone, which is universal to established residential zones. We therefore found that this proposal violates the intent of the land use bylaw. Secondly, considering whether the difficulty experienced is general to the properties in the area, it is noted that the vast majority of properties in this area share the ER3 zoning and are uniform in shape and size, with most of the surrounding lots having been created under the 1952 Abbott Heights subdivision. The difficulty experienced was found to be general to the area. And then finally, considering whether the difficulty experienced results from an intentional disregard for the requirements of the land use bylaw. HRM's process was followed very precisely and diligently in this case. The applicant applied for a permit to reconstruct the existing attached deck, and then subsequently applied for a variance upon learning that their proposal conflicted with the land use bylaw. So intentional disregard of the land use bylaw was not a consideration in this variance request. So the choice before Community Council is to either overturn the decision of the development officer and allow the appeal, resulting in the approval of the variance, or Community Council may uphold the development officer's decision and deny the appeal, resulting in the refusal of the variance. This is the alternative recommended by staff. And that concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. We'll go to questions of clarification. Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question. Can you go back to the slide that showed the elevation of the deck? Just have a quick question. So that is what the applicant submitted for the new deck design?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and when I see it here, it looks like there's a 5-foot privacy screen just on the edge of the deck there. Is that okay?
That's
Thank
right.
you. Thank you.
If no one objects, I'll ask a question from here. Where there was an existing deck here, why wouldn't this be a non-conforming use pre-existing the center plan?
Yeah, so under HRM's review of the permit application, there were no permits found for the original structure. The furthest the structure could be dated back through our research, through aerial imagery in this case, was to 2008. And at that time in 2008, under the Peninsula Land Use Bylaw, the same 6-meter rear setback was required. It was in the form of a 20-foot rear yard setback at that time. So we couldn't establish that the structure was legally permitted at its construction. So that's why we couldn't grant nonconformity.
I think I've inspired Councillor Cleary. We'll go back to Councillor Cleary. Thank you.
So just out of curiosity, when you talk about aerial photography, so how did you go back and research that?
So HRM subscribes to a service with overhead aerial imagery. In this case, it was through an Eagle View company. So those dates range, and then the Halifax Archives also has selective areas for aerial flyover imagery. So those older aerial flyover images did not cover the subject property, but the Eagle View imagery provided an image of the attached deck dating to 2008 at the earliest.
Okay, so that you do have a picture of the deck in 2008?
Correct.
And do you have a picture before 2008?
No.
Okay, so do we have any pictures of anywhere in HRM before 2008?
Yes, I believe there's imagery dating back to the 50s.
Okay, but not in this area?
Not in this area.
Okay, so we could say in 2008 the deck existed, but we can't say it was extant prior to that because we don't have aerial imagery for this area?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, seeing no one else, thank you for the presentation. So our next step would be the appellant will have a chance now to present to council. I understand Kristen Lewis will be presenting on behalf of the property owners, Annie Humble and Arthur McCalla.
In the presentation of how this
Yeah, I think our clerk can help with that.
Okay, so good evening. I'm Kristen Lewis from Architect of Nova Scotia, and I'm speaking on behalf of the homeowners here today, Arthur McCalla and Anya Humble. So if you take a look at our first slide up on the screen here, the intent of this project is to replace the existing rear deck with a smaller and safer deck. The existing deck has been there prior to when the homeowners bought the property in 2005, so it's in need of replacement. The position of the existing house on the property is unique, and looking at the center line at the top of the slide, you can see that the existing house itself is within the rear setback requirement of 20 feet, which is 6 meters. You can also see that the house is positioned quite close to the inner side property line, so there's no place that the homeowners could build a deck with some privacy without building within this existing rear setback, like the existing deck is.
Sorry to interrupt. Could you hold just a sec? We're thinking your mic might not be on or
Oh,
maybe
okay.
poorly positioned.
Right, okay. Do you need me to repeat myself or?
No, we were
Okay.
catching it, but it is broadcast, and so you want to
Right.
make sure it picks up on the tape.
Fair enough. You can also see that the existing rear deck, rear door is shown, on the slide. This door is at roughly 40 inches above grade, so a deck under 24 inches is not feasible. A deck is required here in order for the family to use the existing rear exit of the home. Our last point on this slide is looking at the slide, the dashed line represents the existing deck outline. The proposed deck is just about under 2 feet further away from the property line than the existing deck is, and 4'9" further from the property line than the existing stairs that come off the diagonal corner of the deck. It's also considerably less wide. Although we recognize that the existing deck isn't being considered because there's no record of the permits, we feel that it's relevant to mention given a point I have on the second slide. Oh, there I go. There we go. So this is similar to the slide that Ronan had, but if you look at the property outlined in red, that's the property we're discussing here today. So one reason for the refusal explanation is that they considered, quote, the existing scale / character of the existing neighborhood. However, we feel that we know that there is an existing larger deck here currently. So we feel that we will not be changing or interfering with the existing scale or character of the neighborhood by replacing it with a smaller deck. Another aspect of the refusal, as explained to me, was the difficulty is experiences general to properties in the area. However, we don't feel that this is entirely accurate. If you look at the surrounding properties, there's only one other property nearby with a similar situation at the rear setback, next door at 3168 Ralston Ave, so just directly above the property on the slide there. But we feel that all other homes in the area appear to have adequate space to comply with the 6-meter rear setback. We feel that the situation at 3162 Ralston Ave is unique due to the position of the existing home on the property and it being a corner lot. So in closing, we ask that the council please consider this request, and we thank you for your time.
Thank you for the presentation. Is there any questions of clarification? Okay, thank you very much. So now I will invite any assessed owner within the notification area. This would be within 100 meters of this property. If anyone who's an assessed owner would like to present tonight, now is your moment. Any assessed owners wish to present? Third and final call. All right, so we have nobody, no assessed owners. So now I have to call for folks who, in the general public, who can speak as to why they are affected differently here than any of the broader public. And then council would decide whether or not we want to hear from them. So I will call if there's anyone else in the broader public who wishes to speak tonight. Anyone in the broader public wishing to speak? Third and final call. Anyone wishing to speak? All right, so we have no speakers there. The appellant could respond, except we didn't have anybody. So I think we can safely skip that part. Any questions of clarification from council? Again, there was no one else, so I think we are good there. Ms. Solicitor, perhaps you could explain for council the double negative that always seems to trip us up on appeals.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is the appeal of a refusal. Notice has been provided and the appellant and any people that have received notice were permitted to speak at the appeal. All submissions have been heard. Council must place a motion to allow the appeal on the floor. In this case, which is the appeal of a refusal by the development officer, allowing the appeal allows the variance and overturns the decision of the development officer. Denial of this motion would result in denial of the variance.
Thank you, Ms. Solicitor. So now I'll look to the area councillor and we'll see what council wants to do. Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'll put the motion on the floor to allow the appeal. Second. Thank you, Councillor Mason, for the second. And I'll speak briefly to this. So I did visit the property the other day and had a look. And of course, the deck is still there, the existing deck, and looks quite old. It certainly, to me, I've done a fair bit of renovation and construction in the last few decades, and it certainly looks like it predates 2008 by some number of years. And I appreciate the development officer's predicament here. We did, now the previous land use bylaw did have 20 feet. This one has 6 meters, which is approximately 20 feet. And so that part hasn't changed. However, I don't think there's an intent to violate the land use bylaw, nor is there an issue here that is existing with all the surrounding properties. And I'll explain in two ways. One, the applicant clearly provided for a privacy screen on the deck. So the only thing that would be an issue here would be privacy. And they've mitigated that. The other is, if you look at, we don't have it on the screen anymore, but if you look at this property and then you go up Ralston to Abbott, you'll notice that the properties actually grow in size. This is the shallowest property in the neighborhood. And if you go up to Ralston and Abbott, you'll notice the property there is about 30 feet more deep than this property is. And so there's actually a fair bit of differentiation in properties in the neighborhood. And this property is unique, I think, in the neighborhood, given its shallow depth. And in fact, as the speaker for the appellants indicated, this property's house is already closer to the property line than the setback allows. So legally, they can't actually put an attached deck at all, even a foot deep deck on this property. And so my view as the area councillor is to allow the variance because I believe that the privacy issue is mitigated with the privacy screen, and also the fact that the deck, the proposed deck is smaller than the current deck. I don't have well, I'll add one more mitigating factor. On the property behind them is a garage. And so the deck actually, for I think 2/3 of its length, looks to the back of a garage. And so I think from that perspective, privacy is not an issue either, considering their garage probably doesn't meet the neighbor's garage, probably doesn't meet the setbacks either of 1.8 meters. It looks like it's pretty close to the property line. And so I think for all of those circumstances, I would recommend to my colleagues, of course they have their own questions and comments, but I would recommend as the area councillor that we allow the variance.
Thank you, Councillor Cleary. Councillor Mason.
Too many mics on somebody. I'll put it up a little higher. There we go. I like to say to staff and to the people who are appealing, and I think Stephanie's actually heard me say this before, this is the right process. Technically, on paper, it says you can't build a deck within 6 meters. And we've seen all sorts of interesting things, especially when I first got elected, where potentially people were being allowed to do stuff because probably it would be approved by council anyway. And we don't want to do that. We want the civilian, the elected body to do the variances. I will support what Councillor Cleary says because it seems entirely reasonable. I did find a picture of your house from 1968 when they're building the highway on the PANS archive, but it's not high enough resolution. It looks like there's something back there, but I can't really see what it is. And that would have been before the bylaw. But because of, the fact that the house is already built where we wouldn't allow it today and all those other reasons that Councillor Cleary outlined, I think that this is a reasonable request, especially since it's being made smaller and having a privacy screen. So I'll support the appeal. But I again like to say, because it can be very confusing both to the people who are here and to staff, I don't think staff did anything wrong. I think that it's their job to say, this is what the letter of the law is. And then we're the people who get to, arbitrate that. So I think this is entirely reasonable and I'll support you, Councillor Cleary. Thank you.
Seeing no one else, the question has been called. All those in favor of granting the appeal? That's
Allow the.
allow.
Okay, all right.
Okay, that carries unanimously. All right, so that concludes our main business here tonight. I can flip now back over to where I was already well down the page. We already did public participation. Information items brought forward, there are none. We have no reports, there are no motions, there's no in camera, there's no added items. Does anyone have a notice of motion for anything tonight? Seeing none, the date of our next meeting is August 28th. It's actually, there's a special meeting, isn't there? The one that Tony thought was tonight and didn't come. August 12th, virtual is our next meeting. So for those following along, we'll see you on the 12th. I'll take a motion to adjourn. We are adjourned, moved by Councillor Mason.